Okay, here we go. This time I mean it. All righty then. We are on page 155 in the text. This is section number 63. Chapter 8, section 8, VIII. Chapter 8, section 8, the body as means or end. All righty then. In the last session, session 62, Jesus spoke about the body as a means of communication. Okay, and that's what the body is good for. All right, as long as you believe you're in a body, which we do, we can interact. We interact with people. All right, in those interactions, we become a means of communicating. All right, the truth can come through us and extend through us into the mind of others. All right, that's in a very small nutshell. Okay, it's a pistachio nutshell. Okay, of what was said last time. So, in this session, we're going to contrast the Holy Spirit and the ego's thoughts on the body as means or end. All right. What's echoing in my mind right now is today is December 23rd, 2019. Yesterday, December 22nd, 2019, the wonderful teacher Ram Dass passed away. All right, it's just something of note in my life. This was one of the major stepping stones in my life. All right, his book called Be Here Now. All right, it was just a wonderful revelation to me when I was a little younger, as they say. I just thought I'd note his passing because at the end we'll just make mention of him again, because his body, his form, right, which manifested here on this earth plane, all right, was used as a means of communication. All right, he used his body to communicate the truth. All right, the truth that came through him. All right, the truth that came from his guru to him and through him. All right, from the one mind. So, the body as means or end. Attitudes toward the body are attitudes toward attack. The ego's definitions of anything are childish and are always based on what it believes the thing is for. That is because it is incapable of true generalizations and equates what it sees with the function it ascribes to it. It does not equate it with what it is. To the ego, the body is to attack with. Equating you with the body, it teaches you that you are to attack with. The body, then, is not the source of its own health. The body's condition lies solely in your interpretation of its function. Right. Functions are a part of being, since they arise from being. But the relationship is not reciprocal. The whole does define the part, but the part does not define the whole. Yet to know in part is to know entirely, because of the fundamental difference between knowledge and perception. The perception, the whole in perception, The whole is built up of parts that can separate and reassemble in different constellations. But knowledge never changes, so its constellation is permanent. The idea of part-whole relationships has meaning only at the level of perception, where change is possible. Otherwise, there is no difference between the part and the whole. Okay? As Jesus would remind us, there is no place where the Father ends and I begin. Right? There's no, I and the Father are one. Right? Those were some of the things from the New Testament. Okay? That last statement was anyway. But he says there's no difference between the part and the whole. All right? We see differences here in perception. All right? And we see different parts. Okay? But he said there's really no difference because you're all part of the one mind. Okay? And the one mind defines you, actually. But you, as an individual, all right, are not defining the whole of oneness. All right. So the ego sees your body as something to attack with, to fulfill its, perceived needs. Its imagined needs. Right? So the body is defined as that. Right? It's a tool to get what you want. All right? And to prove that you separated, which was the first thing the son thought he wanted, was separation. That would be a good idea. To leave everything. All right? And when he thought he accomplished it, he said, oh my God, I gotta hide. So we got this body, got this universe. It's the equivalent in the Genesis story in the Garden of Eden of hiding among the trees, all right? Once they knew, they screwed up, all right? And they knew they screwed up immediately, all right? They ran and hid, right? Hid in the trees so God wouldn't find them. And God comes, hey, I'll get you for that. That's the Old Testament God. All righty. Let's go to paragraph 2 before we start having fun here. The body exists in a world that seems to contain two voices fighting for its possession. In this perceived constellation, the body is seen as capable of shifting its allegiance from one to the other, making the concepts of both health and sickness meaningful. The ego makes a fundamental confusion between means and end, as it always does. Regarding the body as an end, the ego has no real use for it because it is not an end. You must have noticed an outstanding characteristic of every end the ego has accepted as its own. When you have achieved it, it is not satisfied. It has not satisfied you. That is why the ego is forced to shift ceaselessly from one goal to another, so that you will continue to hope it can yet offer you something. That was funny. I was just driving the other day, and for some reason that thought crossed my mind. All right? It's that I must think there's still something here. All right? There's still something in this life, in this existence, in this world that will give me something that I want. All right? I don't know. It's the equivalent, the metaphysical equivalent of opening the refrigerator, just staring into it. Right? So what do I want? What do I want? All right. And that too is a familiar scenario with me. Oh well, always wrestling with the body. You'll see in the later paragraphs here why the ego does that. Well, we're always wrestling with the body, and we're never satisfied, right, with either the body or our accomplishments or whatever. There's always a new thing. There's always something else has to be done or achieved or attained. Okay? So regarding the body as an end, the ego has no real use for it because it's not an end. And we see that, we get something and we're, okay, it's not quite what I thought it was going to be, Like somebody was just describing New Year's Eve, right? On New Year's Day, he had regrets. Say, well, New Year's Eve wasn't worth the money. But there was the build-up. Oh, there's going to be this great party, whatever. Right? But that's the way the ego perceives things. Oh, I'm going to get this. Oh, it's going to be great. It's just going to be great. And you get it. And okay, so maybe it's good. But sooner or later, you want something else. It didn't completely satisfy, right? Because the only thing that completely satisfies is the awareness of who you are. Alrighty then. All right? When you have achieved it, it has not satisfied you. This is why the ego is forced to shift ceaselessly from one goal to the other, so that you will continue to hope it can yet offer you something. Paragraph 3. It has been particularly difficult to overcome the ego's belief in the body as an end, because it is synonymous with the belief in attack as an end. The ego has profound investment in sickness. If you are sick, how can you object to the ego's firm belief that you are not invulnerable? This is an appealing argument from the ego's point of view because it obscures the obvious attack that underlies the sickness. If you recognized this and also decided against attack, you could not give this false witness to the ego's stand. Okay? The ego's belief in the body as an end, and that means all form. All right? So the ego has a belief in the body and all form as an end. All right? Form proves that you're not just an abstract extension of God. And the ego has a profound investment in sickness, all right? The physical sickness, all right? Because if you're sick, that means you're not invulnerable, right? It means you're not the offspring of God. You're not a thought in the mind of God. You're prone to sickness, which means you're vulnerable. So, this is an appealing argument from the ego's point of view because it obscures the obvious attack that underlies the sickness. The attack that underlies sickness is the belief that I can be separated from oneness. I can be separated from the mind of God. I can be an individual. I could be a little piece. Okay? So, the attack that underlies the sickness is the attack on oneness. It's the belief in separation. Okay? And you'll see that we're leading up to generalization to where we're going to, especially in the next section, we're going to see the idea reinforced that there's one problem, one solution. The problem being the belief that I separated from God. Very powerful belief because the mind is powerful, right? It has miscreated form, every form that I see, and the form that I believe I am, okay? All righty then. And it's an appealing argument from the ego's point of view. All right? So if you recognize that it's the attack on oneness that underlies all the sickness, right? If you recognize this and also decided against attack, you would not be giving false witness to the ego's stand, to the ego's belief. Okay? Paragraph 4. It is hard to perceive sickness as a false witness because you do not realize that it is entirely out of keeping with what you want. Right? This witness, then, appears to be innocent and trustworthy because you have not seriously cross-examined him. If you had, you would not consider sickness such a strong witness on behalf of the ego's views. A more honest statement would be that those who want the ego are predisposed to defend it. Therefore, their choice of witnesses should be suspect from the beginning. The ego does not call upon witnesses who would disagree with its case, nor does the Holy Spirit. I have said that judgment is the function of the Holy Spirit, and one he is perfectly equipped to fulfill. The ego, as a judge, gives anything but an impartial judgment. When the ego calls on a witness, it has already made the witness an ally. All right, no comment on current events. Okay. So he's telling us, look, I know the situation you're in. It's hard to perceive sickness as a false witness. Hey, when you're sick, you feel sick, you know? And don't ever deny. Jesus will tell you that himself. Don't deny when you feel sick. All right? Oh, it's just a result of believing I'm separated from God. All right? I don't need that medication. I don't need that ointment. I don't need that x-ray. I don't need that whatever. All right? That's it's not a good form of denial. All right? But it's hard to perceive sickness as a false witness. All right? Because you don't realize that it is entirely out of keeping with what you want. All right? Jesus will continually say during the course of the text that I know what you really want. All right? And what you really want is that peace of mind that leads to your remembering of where you are always. All right? Of where you are when the smoke clears, when the dust settles, as they say, when the fog lifts. All right, you realize where you have always been and you always are. All right, but sickness is out of keeping with that. He says, but you don't realize it. You don't realize that sickness is out of keeping with who you are, right? Because you believe you're something else. All right? So this witness, this sickness that proves you're not invulnerable, right, or seems to prove, this witness then appears to be innocent and trustworthy. All right? And why? Because you have not seriously cross-examined him. Excuse me. You really haven't looked at it. All right? Jesus would admonish Helen, you're much too tolerant of mind wandering. Right? So you haven't seriously cross-examined this witness, this ego, this body. If you had, you would not consider sickness such a strong witness on behalf of the ego's views. So sickness is a witness on behalf of the ego's views that I am separate from God, and therefore I am vulnerable. All right? This sickness proves it. Hey, and when you're sick, you believe it. So as Jesus would say early on in the text, if your mind is not, in that place strong enough to realize that this is an illusion, a hallucination, a dream, he says, if you're not there, use a little magic. It'll help you. And by that he means whatever means outside of your mind, go do it. Go to the doctor. Take an aspirin. Put an ice pack on it. Whatever. Rub some dirt on it, as we used to say in Little League. All right? Whatever form, the magic is okay until you awaken and you realize where you've always been. All right? Sometimes the magic helps us along. Okay? You get a toothache. It's hard to sit there in the oneness and realize who you are with a toothache, right? Unless you are completely self-realized, okay? And don't go faking it. Don't go making believe. Because you're going to be sitting there for hours with a toothache. Just take care of yourself. Be normal, as Ken would say, or Dr. Wapnick, all right? Be normal, all right? Just examine the witness, okay? Just realize what's going on, all right? Because a more honest statement would be that those who want the ego are predisposed to defend it. All right, doesn't need an explanation really. Those who want to be separated, want to believe they're separated, will defend the ego. Right? Just reminds me of the Zen story of two monks, a young monk and an old monk walking along, and they're drinking water from the stream, bending over, drinking water. And the young monk asks, when will I realize God? When will I realize nirvana? Probably wouldn't use the word God, okay? It's an atheistic religion or thought system, not a religion. Oh boy. And the young monk says, when will I realize the all? And the old monk takes his head and pushes it under the water. And quite soon the young monk is struggling. And then he pulls his head out and he says, you will realize the all in all. You will realize everything when you want it more than you wanted that next breath. All right? Okay. Sometimes Zen stories are good. All right? Because later on it's going to tell you that the Holy Spirit's voice is as loud as your willingness to hear it. Okay. All right? It's not such a violent approach. So we're predisposed to defend the ego because we're used to this separation. Right? Therefore, the choice of witnesses should be suspect from the beginning. The ego doesn't call upon witnesses who would disagree with his case, nor does the Holy Spirit. All right? I have said that judgment is the function of the Holy Spirit, and one he is perfectly equipped to fulfill. The ego, as a judge, gives anything but impartial judgment. When the ego calls on a witness, it has already made the witness an ally. Okay. So when the ego calls on the body to be a witness to its premises, then it's already an ally. Okay. Paragraph 5. It is still true that the body has no function of itself because it is not an end. The ego, however, establishes it as an end because as such, its true function is obscured. This is the purpose of everything the ego does. Its sole aim is to lose sight of the function of everything. A sick body does not make any sense. It could not make sense because sickness is not what the body is for. Sickness is meaningful only if the two basic premises on which the ego's interpretation of the body rests are true. That the body is for attack and that you are a body. Without these premises, sickness is inconceivable. All right? So Jesus is telling us, look, the body has no function of itself. The body doesn't, it's nothing, right? Because it's not an end. It's not the goal, right? But the ego establishes as an end, and as such, its true function is obscured. The true function is obscured. The true function is communication. Right? The true function is to interact with other bodies, with other forms. All right? And in that interaction, bring the light of the oneness with you. All right? And you don't really have to be itinerant either. You don't have to be a wandering preacher or anything like that. You can reach out to other minds, sitting in your house writing a book or something. But, just the basic, simple idea is that people we meet, the grocery stores, wherever you go during your day, all right? Public transportation, on the road, you can bring the light with you. That's what your body is for. All right? Your body is for helping to heal the split mind, all right? To bring the mind back into the awareness of the oneness, the awareness of where we are all the time. Okay. So, and that's the ego, that's what the ego does. This is the purpose of everything the ego does. It's to obscure, all right? To darken out, all right? Make sure you can't see. You can't see through the dark. You can't see the function. Everything is obscured, all right? So sickness is meaningful only if the two basic premises of which the ego's interpretation of the body rests are true. All right? So sickness is meaningful if the body is for attack and that you're a body. Then sickness has meaning. Right? Without these premises, sickness is inconceivable. paragraph 6. Sickness is a way of demonstrating that you can be hurt. It is a witness to your frailty, your vulnerability, and your extreme need to depend on external guidance. The ego uses this as its best argument for your need for its guidance. It dictates endless prescriptions for avoiding catastrophic outcomes. The Holy Spirit, perfectly aware of the same situation, does not bother to analyze it at all. If data are meaningless, there is no point in analyzing them. All right? The function of truth is to collect information that is true. Any way you handle errors results in nothing. The more complicated the results become, the harder it may be to recognize their nothingness. But it is not necessary to examine all possible outcomes to which premises give rise in order to judge them truly. Right? Ken would love to say the ego loves to study itself. Okay? And it sends us off in all different directions. Why did I say that? Why did I do that? You know, analyzing yourself all the time, or one sickness leading to another, and you can't figure out which one to take care of first, and where did they come from, and where does disease come from in general? How do we stop this? And on and on and on. All right? It just becomes more complicated, right? And the more complicated things get, he says, the harder it is to recognize that they're nothing. They're nothing. They're part of this illusion. They're part of a dream, the result of believing that we're separated from God. It's hard to realize that because they become so complex, demanding that you believe, right? Demanding it. All right. So demanding that you believe you can be hurt. All right. You're frail and vulnerable. All right. And you need to depend on external guidance. You need something from the outside. All right. And just to reiterate, okay, so that's the case, but don't not go get help if you need help, please. That's silly. Okay? Just when you're getting help, you just keep these ideas in the back of your mind. Let them ruminate, mull these things over. All right? So, he just says it's not necessary to examine all possible outcomes to which premises give rise in order to judge them truly. And you'll see, sooner or later, you'll be able to generalize. You'll be able to quickly see in the situation, whatever situation is in, oh, this is the result of me believing that I'm separated from love. I'm separated from God. All right? So the result is I had an argument with that person. I think that person did something to me. All right? They did something. They said something. They physically did something. Who knows? They moved my cheese. Whatever. But soon, when we, after a while, you realize that the ego solutions, they don't work. It might work for a little while, but, that time gets shorter and shorter, and then you go, well, there has to be a better way. I can't, I can't go shaking my fist at everybody. All right? Doesn't change anything. Never makes me feel better. All right, so there must be a better way. And then you start to generalize. Oh, this is the result of me believing that I'm separated from love. I'm separated from oneness, which leads to my thought of vulnerability. All right? Then we can ask, help me to see correctly. All right? Instead of going outside for the external guidance, I come inside for the internal guidance and ask my internal guide, help me to see correctly. All righty then. He's going to be talking about the body again here in paragraph 7 when he says, a learning device is not a teacher. It cannot tell you how you feel. You do not know how you feel because you have accepted the ego's confusion. You therefore believe that a learning device can tell you how you feel. Sickness is merely another example of your insistence on asking guidance of a teacher who does not know the answer. The ego is incapable of knowing how you feel. When I said the ego does not know anything, I said the one thing about the ego that is wholly true. But there is a corollary. If only knowledge has being, and the ego has no knowledge, then the ego has no being. All right. If only knowledge exists, and the ego has no knowledge, the ego doesn't exist. Okay? Keep that in the back of your mind. Just keep that in the back of your mind as you're practicing. And by practicing, I mean looking at the results of your choosing to be separated, choosing to think you can separate. Right? And that's what you do with your life. In your life, your daily life, your whole life becomes a classroom. In which you will be asking your internal teacher, how do I see this correctly? How can I see this correctly? Walk me out of this dream. Okay? So, paragraph 8. You might well ask how the voice of something that does not exist can be so insistent. Have you thought about the distorting power of something you want, even if it is not real? There are many instances of how what you want distorts perception. No one can doubt the ego's skill in building up false cases. Nor can anyone doubt your willingness to listen until you choose not to accept anything except truth. When you lay the ego aside, it will be gone. The Holy Spirit's voice is as loud as your willingness to listen. It cannot be louder without violating your freedom of choice, which the Holy Spirit seeks to restore, never to undermine. Okay? So, Holy Spirit, Jesus, they don't, all of a sudden drop in and say, okay, stop the nonsense. Let's go. All right? Or the eagle coming out of the night in Salisbury Hill. All right? He says, grab your things, I've come to take you home. I love that song. All right? Peter Gabriel. All right? Because this is what the Course is saying. All right? Except it's basically the last message from the ego or the message from the seeker himself. It says, you can have my things. They've come to take me home. Okay? But he says, you might well ask, how does something that doesn't exist have a voice that's so insistent? And he says, because you distort everything by the power of what you want. Right? That's the original thought, that I can be separated from oneness. I can be separated from everything. Right? And it was a pretty tempting thought in the beginning. Right? That's the power of what you want. Right? And it distorts. He says, have you thought about the distorting power of something you want, even if it's not real? Right? There are many instances of how what you want distorts perception. Even in a, I believe it's the quantum physicists who, some time ago came up with the statement that the person conducting the experiment has an effect on the experiment. All right, it has because of this. No matter how impartial these scientists are, right, on some deep level, they may want a certain outcome. That has an effect on the experiment, the scientists say. Okay? And years ago, there was a theory that said that the 65 or 70,000 people that are sitting in the stadium in South Bend, Indiana, watching the Notre Dame game, those 65,000 people had an effect on the flight of the football. Okay. But, all kidding aside, this is what he's saying. Just check it out in your life. There were times when you really wanted something, okay? And that had an effect, right? It had an effect on your perception of things, okay? And he says, and you can't doubt, he says, the ego builds a great case, all right? Just the case that you are a body. The ego says, yeah, you're a body. Come on. All right? Next thing you know, something hurts. Or you're sick. You got 100 and something fever. All right? This is, no one can doubt the ego's skill in building up a false case. Nor can anyone doubt your willingness to listen. Until you choose. Until you choose not to accept anything except truth. And we do that when we decide to go to our inner teacher and say, please, help me to see this correctly. And the Holy Spirit will answer, and it will be contingent upon our willingness to hear it, to listen to that answer. All right? Like that young monk, wants he wants his next breath. He had a great willingness to have that next breath, okay? And so the Holy Spirit's voice is as loud as our willingness to hear it, to listen. Okay? And it can't be any louder, it can't be imposed on us. It has to be our choice. Okay. paragraph 9, page 157. The Holy Spirit teaches you to use your body only to reach your brothers. Okay. So he can teach his message through you. Okay. This will heal them and therefore heal you. Right? The giving and receiving are instantaneous. Right? When you give, you receive. So as you reach out to your brothers, you reach out to all the others, they heal, you heal. Okay? It's simultaneous. Everything used in accordance with its function, as the Holy Spirit sees it, cannot be sick. All right? Everything used otherwise is. Do not allow the body to be a mirror of a split mind. Do not let it be an image of your own perception of littleness. Do not let it be an image of your own perception of littleness. Do not let it reflect your decision to attack. Health is seen as the natural state of everything when interpretation is left to the Holy Spirit, who perceives no attack on anything. Health is the result of relinquishing all attempts to use the body lovelessly. Health is the beginning of the proper perspective on life under the guidance of the one teacher who knows what life is, being the voice for life itself. So you're in a teacher, all right? The Holy Spirit is the term we use in the course. Your inner guide, Holy Spirit, the memory of who you really are, okay, is the voice for life itself. Okay? So, and when we let that guide interpret everything for us, we're in a healthy state. Right? Health is seen as the natural state of everything. Right? There's no split mind anymore. Health is seen as the natural state of everything when interpretation is left to the Holy Spirit. Okay? Help me to see this correctly. However you want to say it, whatever your supplication is, help me see correctly. What does love look like in this situation? Right? What is truth? Okay? Let me see through the eyes of peace. All those things. Right? That's your willingness to listen to your inner teacher. Right? And to regain health. Right? And to bring it, because you'll still be in this form, all right, until you totally relinquish everything, and you're fine with that, okay? Right. But until then, we will interact, and we can be beneficial. We can bring the light, okay? And the light that comes through us, okay, when it touches a person, right, they experience the light, as Jesus would say, in a language they can understand. All right, it fits their dream, their process. Okay? Just as Ram Dass, and he came, and in his process, he had many spiritual experiences. All right, in Harvard, in the School of Psychology, with the famous Dr. Timothy Leary. All right, they experimented with mind-expanding drugs, they called it, LSD. Okay, and I used to smugly say that they had experiences where, and then Ram Dass went to India and Timothy Leary went to Hollywood. All right. Timothy Leary went to California. They both got drummed out of Harvard for the same reason, all right, experimenting with these psychedelics. All right. And they went their separate ways. Ram Dass had many spiritual experiences, and soon he met his guru on his path in India. All right, the way he describes it in the book, if I remember correctly, was he said he felt kind of strange. Some blonde-haired surfer from California was leading him through the jungles up the mountain to meet his teacher. All right, and then he met his teacher, and his teacher showed him that he didn't need the drugs anymore. He just had to go beyond that, because the drugs were, although they were a stepping stone for him, they would eventually be tearing his body down, all right, tearing him apart. Okay, he says you don't need that. All right, you can go beyond that, and that's what the message was. And Ram Dass continued through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and all the way up until December 22nd, 2019. He was channeling the truth, channeling the light, right? And he touched my life at a time when his message came in a language I could understand. And it just sunk right in, all right? And remember that, as they say, the truth is one. Truth is what it is, all right? And the sages know it by many names, okay? So it comes to you in a language you can understand, all right? And, when we listen to our inner guide, right? When we truly say, I don't want this interpretation, I don't want this ego's witness, right? Help me to see correctly, right? Then we're back on the path, all right? And when we sincerely ask, you will hear, all right? And let me tell you, it's not like, hey, Kev, stop doing that. That's not what you hear. It becomes in a form of an idea or a thought or something. Sometimes I call them loud thoughts. All right, and it's just, it brings you along on the path to awakening to who you really are. All right, as Jesus says a little while back there, it brings you along the journey without a distance. To a goal that has never changed, all right? And the goal is to remember who you are, all right? And in the words of Ram Dass, you do that by being here now, all right, in the present moment. And sit here in the present moment, invoking your inner guide. Help me out here. Okay, and that's the difference between the Holy Spirit and the ego's use of the body. All right. Okay then. Stop me before I speak again. All righty then, everyone, and enjoy the journey, and I will see you next time.